the last thing I want to talk about why Sammy Watkins potentially could turn his career around with the Green Bay Packers. Sammy Watkins was a former first round pick a couple of years ago coming out of Clemson. He got drafted in the first round by the Bills, and he had some really productive first couple of years with the Bills, and then he ended up getting traded to the LA Rams, and then with the Rams, he was kind of good with a season, and then he ended up signing with the Chiefs for the next couple of years, and he kind of gotten, ghosted in a sense. A lot of people kind of forgot about him, but during his time for the Chiefs, he was a really, really good wide receiver 3. As a matter of fact, he probably was the best wide receiver 3 in the league, and many people forget just how good Sammy Watkins was when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs. In 2018 against the Denver Broncos, he had a 8 reception performance for 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also was really big in an AFC Championship game that year and their loss to the Patriots. He had 4 receptions for 114 receiving yards. 2019, week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he went off, 9 receptions for 198 receiving yards and had 3 touchdowns. He also had a really big role in the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl run during their playoff season. Well, during their playoff appearances in 2019 on the road to the Super Bowl. He had 7 receptions, 114 yards, and a touchdown against the Tennessee Titans in the AFC Championship game. And their win against the 49ers in the Super Bowl that year, also same playoff run. He had 5 receptions for 98 receiving yards. So when Sammy Watkins has been asked to step up during his career over the last couple of years, he's delivered. And last year with the Baltimore Ravens, he didn't really do all that much. He had 2 solid performances. Week 1 against the Raiders, he caught 4 passes for 96 yards. Week 3 against Detroit, he had 4 receptions for 68 receiving yards. And then after that, he kind of became ghosted out of the Ravens offense. He also had a couple of injuries, but you also got to remember that the quarterback position didn't really do him no favors because Lamar Jackson went down. You had Tyler Huntley throwing passes, Josh Johnson. So for Matt LaFleur, he has been asked about Sammy Watkins, and he said a lot of good things about him. As a matter of fact, him and Watkins have history dating back to their time when they both were in LA. LaFleur at the time, back in 2017, was the Rams offensive coordinator, even though he didn't call the plays, but he still had a big role in terms of game plan and what the Rams were going to do on a week-to-week basis. And then you got to remember that was also when Sammy Watkins was in LA for that brief stint. So LaFleur has said a lot of good things about him. He said recently that he doesn't think that Sammy Watkins' game has fallen off. He just feels that he has suffered from a lack of opportunity, and he's going to have a big role in the Packers offense this year. Now, I don't know if this is just coaches talk, but I really do believe that Matt LaFleur meant every word that he said, because I don't think that Matt LaFleur would bring in Sammy Watkins and then knowing that they had a pretty good relationship with each other during their brief time in LA, he would just bring him in and not utilize him at all. And also, look at the current wide receiver situation with the Green Bay Packers. Okay, now you did draft Christian Watson out of North Dakota State in this past year's NFL draft. You also do have Romeo Doubs, Juwan Winfrey, but Sammy Watkins has a really good chance to end up being one of the starting 2 outside wide receivers for Green Bay this year, because Allen Lazard right now is holding out due to a contract dispute. He has yet to sign his 1-year deal that comes from the Packers putting a second-round tender on him, and I don't really understand why Allen Lazard is holding out. Doesn't really make too much sense. I don't think Green Bay is going to budge at all, because, I mean, yes, Allen Lazard had a really good season last year. He could end up breaking out with DeVante Adams getting traded. He's going to get more volume, more targets in the passing game. But you think Allen Lazard, instead of being worried about his contract, he would go out there and try to cement himself as the legitimate number 1 wide receiver simply for the fact that he wants to have a better chemistry and a better connection with Aaron Rodgers. With him slated to be the presumed number one wide receiver this year for Green Bay, you think that he would be in minicamp trying to get those reps. But, he's trying to get a new contract, and I don't even know how much Green Bay would pay him because, this is somebody who hasn't really proven all that much. So I think that this is a good situation for Sammy Watkins to come in and really surprise people. And Sammy Watkins is still pretty young. He's 29 years old. He's not in your late 30s, anything like that. This is still somebody who has a pretty good amount left in the tank. And as I mentioned earlier, there has been several instances where Sammy Watkins has stepped up when he's needed to. So with him going to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, if he can get 70, 80 targets, I think that Sammy Watkins could have a pretty productive season with the Green Bay Packers. And then on top of that, you're playing with the bad man Aaron Rodgers. I think that also benefits him as well, even though he has played with some good quarterbacks. He has played with Lamar. He has played with Patrick Mahomes. But Aaron Rodgers is regarded as the best quarterback in the league. So with him playing with Aaron Rodgers, I really think that's going to help elevate him. And then him and LaFleur already have a little bit of similarity or familiarity with each other. So that's also going to vote well in his favor. So I think that Sammy Watkins has a really good case for why he could end up having a career resurgence in Green Bay this year. And even if Allen Lazard comes back and he does sign his one-year deal, I think that Sammy Watkins could outright beat him out. Because I think Sammy Watkins is a better wide receiver than Allen Lazard. And I think that there were a pretty good amount of Green Bay Packers fans who will agree with that assumption. The thing with Sammy Watkins isn't talent. The thing with him is, can you trust him to stay healthy? Because if he can stay healthy and he can get around 7, 8 targets a game, I think you're going to end up having somebody who could end up having a really big role and a really big impact on this Green Bay offense when you're searching for questions of who's going to be that guy to help you replace DeVante Adams. And we already know that Christian Watson is probably going to be your wide receiver 2, but your wide receiver 1 is still up for debate. You get what I'm saying? And also Christian Watson could be in that same discussion as well. But overall, when it comes to the discussion of who's going to be your 2 starting outside receivers, we already know Watson's going to be one, but who's going to be the second? Allen Lazard or Sammy Watkins? If I was a betting man, I would put my money down on Sammy Watkins. And if he can stay healthy throughout training camp and whatnot, I think that he's going to end up getting the nod there. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being Aaron Rodgers' most dependable target this year. He's a veteran wide receiver. He knows the game. He is somebody who has some familiarity with LaFleur and his system in a sense. So I don't think there's no reason for why Sammy Watkins shouldn't be able to turn his career around. And I was watching a segment on ESPN when they were talking about this, and somebody just viewed him as another guy in the receiver room. I kind of felt that was a little bit disrespectful to Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins just isn't a guy. This is somebody who has played his role pretty effectively in almost every single offense that he's been in. With the Rams, the Bills, when the Bills needed him to be a number 1 wide receiver, he stepped up. The problem with him and the Bills was that he couldn't stay healthy. Not that he didn't have the talent. When he was with the Rams, alongside Brandon Cook, he played his role perfectly. He was their number 2 wide receiver. He went to Kansas City. I feel he played his role in Kansas City pretty well. He was their 3rd best option in the passing game. And when he was targeted, he stepped up in big moments for Kansas City. And for the Ravens, their quarterback position and their play there kind of held him back a little bit. So with him going to Green Bay, if Green Bay needs him to be their second option outside of Christian Watson in the passing game, or if they need Sammy Watkins to be their number 1 option in the passing game while they allow Christian Watson to develop, I think he's going to end up delivering. This is somebody who knows his role. You give him a role and he goes out there and he performs and gets it done at a very solid level, a really high level. So maybe I'm just being overly optimistic because I like Sammy Watkins as a player and a person. I would love to see him kind of have a late career resurgence. And I'm somebody who is a big fan of a great comeback story. And I think that Sammy Watkins could be one of the better comeback stories in the league this year if he's able to stay healthy and he gets the opportunity. If you're looking for a sleeper pick for fantasy football, somebody who you could get for cheap late in the draft when you're just trying to fill out your roster with somebody who may have a little bit of upside, I would look at drafting Sammy Watkins. You may not even have to draft him at all. You're probably going to be able to get him for free because not too many people are going to be looking at Sammy Watkins and the opportunity that he has with Green Bay. I think there's a lot of people out there who don't even know that Sammy Watkins right now is on the Green Bay Packers. There were already people who didn't even know he was playing for the Baltimore Ravens last year. So let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Remember, you can get the podcast anywhere. Spotify Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. And I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the podcast.